My name is Brooke Rutledge. At 33 years old, I spent every single dollar I had on a broken-down gas station that my entire family called a grave. The day I signed the papers, my mother looked me dead in the eyes and said I was a fool. My father stared at the wall like he couldn't even bear to look at me. My brother Wade laughed out loud and called me a hopeless failure. They were gone before the ink was even dry. 1 week later, I stood alone in the dark behind that old convenience store, staring at a steel door that someone had gone to great lengths to hide. What I discovered behind that wall didn't just change my life, it completely rewrote the story my family had spent 40 years telling about itself. And the night I finally spoke the truth out loud at my father's own gala, the entire room went silent. Welcome back to Frontline Retribution, the place where ordinary women set hard boundaries, keep their dignity, and let the truth do the talking. If quiet comebacks and powerful redemption stories are your thing, you're in the right place. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so the next story finds you. The title company in Calico Bend had just one conference room, and that morning my whole family showed up to fill it. I still don't know how they heard about the closing, probably Dale. My father, Garrett Rutledge, walked in like he was inspecting one of his own job sites. My mother, Lorraine, sat directly across from me, clutching her purse like she might need to run at any moment. I placed my cashier's check on the table, $1,000, every cent I had saved in 11 long years of grinding. The escrow officer slid the deed across the table. My mother's voice was quiet but sharp. You're throwing your life in a ditch, Brooke. My father stood by the window with his back to me and said, Real Rutledges build something. They don't go digging through other people's trash. Wade leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, smirking. You know what you are, Brooke? A hopeless failure. I signed my name. The pen didn't shake, and that surprised even me. When they filed out, my father never once turned around. I watched through the window as their 3 vehicles pulled away, 3 sets of taillights disappearing toward the life that no longer had room for me. I sat there alone with the deed to a dead gas station 10 minutes up Route 9 and $84.16 left in my bank account. There was no going back. I had finally won the only argument that truly mattered and lost every person in that room. In Calico Bend, people saw me as the Rutledge who couldn't hold anything together. The truth was much quieter and much uglier. For 6 years, I kept the books for my father's company, Rutledge Land and Holdings. I was damn good at it. But in 2019, Wade pushed through a land deal where the numbers didn't match reality. I flagged it twice in writing. When the county came asking questions, only my initials were on the paperwork. My father chose to believe his son. I left quietly and opened my own small bookkeeping business. For 2 years, I did honest work for honest people. Then, my biggest client filed bankruptcy and wiped out months of unpaid fees. I had to close my office in March. I've always been the kind of woman who reads the fine print twice and still apologizes for taking up space. I carry other people's mistakes like rent I owe. That quiet sense of responsibility was the weakness my family never noticed, because it always worked in their favour. So when Dale Mercer slid into my booth at the diner and offered me a property nobody wanted for just $41,000, I listened. The old Howren station had been shut down since 1987. I did everything right, pulled the title history back to the 1930s, checked the underground tanks, hired an old inspector. Everything looked clean. I bought it because it was the only door my $84 could open, and because I wanted something that was finally completely mine. The first night I owned it, I went out alone with a flashlight. The place smelled of old diesel and damp plaster. In the storage room, the back wall sounded hollow when I knocked. A cool draft came from the bottom seam. I couldn't sleep that night. Something about that wall felt intentional. A few days later, I returned with a crowbar. I told myself I'd just remove one panel. Behind the cheap 80s panelling was a poured concrete wall and a heavy riveted steel door, the kind used on old bank vaults. Someone had hidden this door not once, but twice. I photographed everything, measured it, and went home to research. The building started as a bonded warehouse in the early 1920s, a legal place to store liquor during Prohibition. When I finally opened that steel door, it revealed a stone staircase leading down into a hidden cellar. The air smelled of aged oak, old paper, and time itself. Rows and rows of wooden racks held hundreds of dark glass bottles, bonded pre-repeal whiskey from 1924. Still sealed in straw and original crates. The wax was intact. I didn't scream or celebrate. I did what I've always done. I started counting, documenting, and protecting what I'd found. The bottles were worth a fortune. But the real treasure was the paperwork. In a hidden strongbox behind an old desk, I found the original bonded manifest, federal permits, and the most important documents of all, a 1931 promissory note and bill of sale. My grandfather, Amos Rutledge, had loaned money to A.N. Howering during the worst year of the Depression on brutal terms. When Howering couldn't pay, Amos foreclosed and took the land, the building, and everything inside it, including the sealed whiskey that was never found. The entire Rutledge empire, the subdivisions, the hospital wing, the scholarships was built on top of that hidden truth. Word travelled fast. Dale showed up acting too casual. Then my parents arrived with a casserole and helpful suggestions about folding the property into the family business. Wade came next with threats dressed as concern. My father even visited alone one evening, talking about legacy and how the family had to stick together. But I stayed calm. I had the collection professionally appraised. The conservative estimate was over $1 million. I signed a consignment contract with a top auction house in Denver. I partnered with Sutter, my father's biggest rival, to restore the station into a beautiful roadhouse. Most importantly, I built a thick folder of perfect paperwork: my deed, title opinion, auction contract, the 1931 documents, and the lawyer's letter confirming everything was legally mine. They fought with whispers, pressure, and town gossip. I fought with signatures and records. Founders Day Gala arrived. My father was being honoured as Citizen of the Year. They invited me expecting me to stand on stage and hand everything over. Instead, when my father called me up and handed me the microphone, I stayed perfectly calm. I thanked him sincerely. Then I began laying out the documents one by one on the podium. I showed my recorded deed, I showed the auction contract, and finally I showed the 1931 promissory note and foreclosure papers in my grandfather's own handwriting. I looked at my father and said quietly, "Granddad didn't just buy the Howering place, Dad. He took it from a desperate man during the Depression. That's where our family name really began, right there in the room you called other people's trash." The room went completely silent. My father's face broke. Wade stood up red-faced. My mother looked like her whole world was cracking. The auction house representative confirmed everything publicly. The story my family had built for decades was over in a single evening. The auction brought in $1.3 million. The local paper ran the real story. Dale Mercer's reputation was destroyed. The questions people used to whisper about me started being asked about my father and brother instead. The following spring, the station reopened, beautifully restored, with the hidden cellar preserved behind glass and the true history told honestly, starting with A.N. Howering's name. My mother visited once. She said the family missed me and that it wasn't too late to come back. I told her gently, "The door is never locked, Mum, but I'm done asking permission to be worth something. If you take one thing from my story, let it be this: your worth was never theirs to give or take away. Sometimes the thing your family calls your grave is exactly the ground you were meant to build your life on. Dig anyway. Stand anyway." That's my story: one rundown gas station, one hidden steel door, and a family name that was never as clean as it pretended to be. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.